Hello everyone, welcome to William and the Magic Box. Today on our show, we are going to have Tim. Tim is from Illinois in the USA. So let's see what Tim has to say. Enjoy the interview.
Hello,
Hello Tim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for taking the time today for the interview. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank
So tell
you
me,
for
how
having me.
the pleasure's all mine. So tell me, how's your day going so far?
Pretty good. Off to a slow start. Be running some errands after this.
So tell me, where are you from, Tim?
I am from a very, very small town in the northernmost part of southern Illinois. um, Town of about 1,000 people. That at the time I grew up there, had 8 churches and no bars. So the bar to church ratio was very skewed in the favor of churches. Um,
Wow.
in fact, as recently as 1995, they brought it to a vote to allow the sale of alcohol in town, and it was voted down because it would bring in too many ruffians.
Interesting.
They have since changed that, and just before the just before the pandemic, there was a new vote taken where they
Wow.
finally allowed the sale of alcohol for the first time since Prohibition.
Oh,
In,
wow.
in
Interesting.
but I'm currently live. I live. I'm so. I told myself when I was growing up I wanted to live as far from there as possible. And was hoping to live in either Europe or Asia, like Japan or Southeast Asia. Didn't ever make it to either of those places, and in fact, didn't make it out of Illinois in terms of living spaces. But I did live in Chicago for 13 years,
Wow.
um, and but I now find myself in Central Illinois. So I've been in Illinois my whole life in terms of living.
I see. And so the city you live in right now, how far are you from Chicago?
About 2.5 hours. Where I
That's not,
grew up, I was about 4 hours. I was actually much closer to St. Louis. It was like hour and 15, hour and a half.
wow. So tell me, what was the biggest joy of growing up in the area, the city where you were born?
I spent a lot of time exploring the woods. And because between the acreage that my grandparents owned, I have my great aunt's land, two of them were directly behind that, and behind that was a 100-acre shared estate of family land. So I had a lot of adventures.
And do you have siblings as well?
I have two brothers, both younger,
Mhm.
um, who actually I'll see tomorrow because my mom's retiring. Today is her last day of work, so
Oh my God, what a beautiful time to connect with you. That's amazing. Oh, I'm sure she must be very excited.
she is thrilled.
Oh, oh.
I've been telling her for the past year she should be starting to kind of check out, but that didn't set in until like 3 weeks ago. Then she was like, I'm so done with this. I'm like, that's where you should have been a year ago.
Amazing. I'm sure she must be very excited to start this new journey in her life. That's amazing. And tell me, what do you do for work, for living, Tim?
Well, I'm an herbalist and an aromatherapist, and I had a store in Hillsborough, Illinois, which is kind of between Springfield, Illinois, and St. Louis. And I closed it to move in with my partner in Tuscola, which was 2 hours away from where the store was. And I looked for places to reopen it here, but was getting no responses from anyone about buildings that were available. So I decided it's time to focus on other things.
I,
So my game plan is to go back to school for graduate studies, ultimately getting a PhD. Um, I am still selling some of the things that I sold at my store in booths. So it's not like I'm doing nothing. It's just I'm in a transitionary period.
I see. So you say you are herbalist, and the second one, I didn't get it properly.
aromatherapist. So
Aromatherapy.
essential oils. It's interesting in the world of herbal medicine and aromatherapy, they're viewed
Mhm.
as separate entities. And it's like you're working with the same stuff, just different substances made from them. So if you work with the two of them, you get a better experience of working with the whole plant.
I see.
So I I've I've done a lot of studying. The herbalist stuff I did mostly through the Midwest School of Herbal Studies, which is out in the Minneapolis St. Paul area. And my aromatherapy certifications are through the School of Aromatic Studies, which is run by Jade Schutz. And I've taken French aromatherapy courses. I've done a lot of coursework in both fields.
Amazing. Okay, so during the interview, I'm going to explore a little bit more about your journey so far and also about your point of views, okay?
Okay.
Right, so before we start our journey within the Magic Box, I would like you to tell me something interesting about yourself or maybe something that not many people know about you.
Well, it's a long thing, but I've had a near-death experience.
Actually, I made a note here because when I was chatting to you to organize the interview, you mentioned that, and I said, okay, I need to make a note here to ask you about it. It's okay to share?
Yep. Um, yeah, I had started graduate school in 2021, I think it was, in the fall term. And October of that year, like around October 1st, I started feeling sick. Like I was spiking fevers daily of 104. But I didn't have health insurance at that point in time. And I went and I had all the symptoms of COVID, except I still had my taste and smell, and I didn't have noticeable respiratory symptoms. So I'm like, well, I should go get a COVID test, which I did, and it was negative, which I expected it to be. um, and so I'm like, okay, it must be the flu. So after 2 weeks go by, and I'm still having exactly the same symptoms, I'm like, okay, if it was the flu, I would be over it. So I got another COVID test, which was also negative. Um, and I was like, okay, I clearly need antibiotics because I mean, being an herbalist, I do know enough about because I had been taking all of the herbal stuff that should have helped me through whatever it was, and they did help keep symptoms at a minimum. And but I was not getting better, so I went to an urgent care, which is what passes for going to the doctor in the States these days. um, and I'm like, I know I can convince them that I've at least got a sinus infection or an ear infection. And sure enough, they said I probably had one or both. So they gave me a Z Pack. Uh, Z Packs aren't as effective as they used to be when they first came out because things have been exposed to them. So I did get to feeling better, but still didn't feel well. And within 2 days of discontinuing that treatment, which is only 5 days you're on it, I was back to spiking fevers again. And so, but they weren't spiking as high. But every day I would run a fever at some point during the day for months. um, I got insurance that kicked in on January 1st. And so on January 2nd, I had a doctor's appointment. And my doctor worked with the infectious disease person who asked for, on that first visit, I think they took 20 vials of blood, some of which were the big, like 4 ounce bottles. Um, and then in within a week, they took another 20. um,
Wow.
then I got an email or a message from the infectious disease doctor who said, come to the emergency room and I'll meet you there. So went to Memorial Hospital in Springfield, which was an hour and a half drive, because lived in a very, very rural area. And after sitting in a bed in the hall, surrounded by rooms full of COVID patients, and watching someone having been wheeled out in a zipper bag, um, who was
Wow.
sitting in the room, who was in the room across from where I was. I talked to the infectious disease doctor, and she took another 40 vials of blood, and I had a CT scan, a chest X-ray, and a urine sample, and then was in basically a holding pattern for until I heard that she got the results back from that. Well, on the 1st of February, I'd gotten to the point where I couldn't get off I couldn't stand from the couch. I could barely say anything other than like, I'm fine. My brain fog had gotten to the point where I would stop mid sentence and not know what I had said, what we were talking about, what I should say. um,
Wow.
and I've since learned that that was because I had gotten hypoxia. So my brother said, I'm going to get an oximeter. So he ran into town and bought an oximeter and came back, and my blood oxygen level was 70, which is very low, which is why I got hypoxia. And so they carried me to the car and took me to the emergency room of the more local hospital. Um, and they My mom tells me that she told me to wait in the car, that she'd be back with a wheelchair. I don't remember that. But again, I had hypoxia. So I will take her word for that. But since I didn't hear that, I opened the door, slid myself out of the car, staggered in, and stood at the counter with my hands on the counter, just going like this, because I couldn't just stand.
Wow.
Because I had no blood oxygen. So they said, I'm going to wheel you right into a room. And they did. And they put me on oxygen and put me on a saline drip. And then I could sleep. Uh, and so I drifted out in and out of consciousness for what in my mind was days, but it was apparently only a couple of hours. uh,
Wow.
and was in the hospital there for 4 days. That year, winter only happened in February, and when it happened with a vengeance. Like the roads were icy for the entirety of February. So between hospital crowding for COVID and icy conditions, they wanted to move me to a hospital that was larger where I would get better care. um, so finally, on the 4th day, they transferred me to St. John's Hospital in Springfield. That I You'll understand why later, but I would rather die than be carried across their threshold again.
Mhm.
This, um,
Wow.
but so they checked my vitals when I got there. I was on level 5 oxygen, and for the next 3 days, nobody checked any of them. I was told that I had to have a blood thinner or I would die, and that if I didn't take a blood thinner, my only other option was to be strapped into the bed with those things on your legs that are supposed to keep you from getting blood clots. Like, I don't think I'm a blood clot risk, but whatever. um, so I opted to have the blood thinner rather than be tied to the bed. Because at that point, I could get around. Although, once you have a certain number of wires hanging off of your body, it becomes difficult. Uh, and Then for the next 3 days, nobody checked anything. They didn't check oxygen. They didn't check blood pressure. They didn't check my temperature. They came around every day, multiple times, and took COVID tests. Over the
Wow.
course of this 6-month period, I must have had over 200 COVID tests, all of which came back negative,
Wow.
um, which never surprised me considering I had had this for a long time. And it's not like I was developing anything new. But I'm like, I've been in your hospital. Where do you expect me to have gotten it from? I've had literally one visitor. If you're saying you think I got it from the staff, that's a problem. But so on day 3, two things happened. First thing was, even with the hypoxia, you latch onto certain things and you do not forget them because you know they're important. So you find a way to keep that knowledge. My infectious disease doctor had told me that I was on about a dozen different drip medications, all
Wow.
of which I needed, and most of which had no oral equivalent. and that if I didn't stay on them for the entirety duration, I would be putting my life at risk.
Wow.
Later that day, I was visited by a nurse who I now affectionately refer to as Nurse Ratchet, um, who came into the room and said, well, I've talked to the floor doctor. Now, the floor doctor was the only St. John's doctor I had. All of the other doctors were with Springfield Clinic, and they were wonderful. The Springfield Clinic doctors, wonderful. Um, that particular St. John's doctor, not so much. In fact, had I had the strength, I would have punched him in the face at one point. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The so she said, I talked to the floor doctor, and we transferred all of your medications to oral medications, and we're sending you home today. And I said, you are not sent. No, actually, all of the vocal inflection here is exactly what happened. You are not sending me home today. I said, and she said, well, why not? And kicked her head to the side like that. And I said, well, for starters, I'm still on oxygen. And she said, you're not normally on oxygen. I said, no. Like, at that point, I'm like, I'm 44. What do you think I have that I'm on oxygen all the time? And so she said, well, you have asthma, right? I said, no. You have COPD, right? I said, no. She lists off like 12 other things, the answers to all of which were no. And I'm like, I have to be kind because I don't want put in the psych ward because then I have no control over anything, which is a wonderful way to have to be thinking about your care. um, and so she said, well, let's see how you do off the oxygen. I'm like, okay, this is a test I know I will fail. So I said, sure. So she goes out and brings back with her a thing to carry the saline drip bag and an oximeter. Now, this is the first time in 3 days an oximeter has gone on my finger, and I'm on level 5 oxygen. So she walks me to the door, says, okay, let's take all this off, and puts the oximeter on. I take about 3 steps into the hall, lean against the wall, and she says, let's get you right back into that chair. So she takes me back in, and then that's the last I see of her that day.
Wow.
So that night, I called my mom and I said, are you coming to visit? And she said, well, I've got this for work and I'm doing this. I said, let me rephrase this. I need you here to be my advocate because today they wanted to send me home because they said I was the healthiest person on the floor. If I'm the healthiest person on the floor, everyone else on this floor must be almost dead because I'm not healthy.
Wow.
It's like just because I can smile at a nurse doesn't mean I feel good. I grew up like old farmers did, and where your pain is yours to bear. You don't inflict it on other people. And so, because I have a lot of farmers in my ancestry, but anyway, my brother is still a farmer, which actually I got into an argument with the doctor over that too. But I tell you all of that because the next day, my mom was there, and I started feeling bad in the afternoon. And I called the nurses station and said, can I get someone in here to check my vitals? So for the first time, they bring in the full machine to check everything. The same Nurse Ratchet walks in the room complaining that they just can't monitor everyone on the floor and how horrible it is. And I'm like, I really don't care what's going on the floor. Right now, something's going on in me. And so, can we hurry this up? So she gets it all hooked up, turns it on, immediately goes to the phone and calls the cardiologist. The cardiologist says, we'll have a team of 15 people there in 5 minutes. Under no circumstances do you leave that room. Monitor the situation. So by the time the 15th person gets there, I start having a hallucination where like the doctors and the nurses are doing this really dark, really creepy song and dance musical number that I would rather not relive ever again. That was horrid. But I find myself then transported from that to this other place, like totally calm, totally serene, totally lucid. Everything around me, spreading out as far as the eye can see, is orange-colored sand, just like waves and waves of sand, with a gray, overcast sky. Like you can't see any sky for the clouds. And strewn about it are these huge, like megalithic, rotting corpses like bigger than dinosaurs or whales or anything, just huge. And behind me, I hear giggling. And I'm like, where am I? Yeah. And I'm like, well, I need to figure out where I am. So I started walking. And like, I'm not going near the giggling because that doesn't sound safe. So I decided to walk forward. And I eventually came to this opening that was like a hallway, um, just sort of floating in the space. So I'm like, well, that looks more welcoming than where I am. So I started to walk down it. And after walking a little bit, I came to a door on my left. And I turned, and I looked at the door. The door was like just an open door. But through that door was a door that had a door in it that was cracked open. And in that crack, I could see flashes. And I'm like, that's me. Those images are me. This is my life flashing before my eyes. Let's not stay here. So I moved on. It came to another door. I turned and I looked at that door. That door had huge wooden planks and big iron workings and a hole that was like a circle, no lock or anything, but it was closed. And I stood and I looked at the door and thought to myself, behind that door is all knowledge. Like the answer to every question imaginable is behind that door. I'm not going to go in there right now, but I want to remember where it is because I will probably want to come back. But I want to see what else is here. And so I kept walking. And then the next thing that happened was I came to the entryway to a huge auditorium. Everything in the auditorium was white. And when I say it was white, I mean it was gleaming, light pouring from every surface, almost blinding lit room. And all the way across was a mosaic of the most beautiful tree I'd ever seen in my life. Like the leaves felt like they were moving and it was just electric. And kept thinking to myself, I have to see that tree closer. Like this is impossible to exist. I have to understand this tree. And just as I was about to take my first step, I thought, you just saw your life flash before your eyes. You're being asked to step into the light. And then I woke up.
Wow.
My mom tells me in the room what was happening was that my blood pressure had dropped to 0. The nurse Ratched and the doctor got into an argument over whether or not to put me on a saline drip until the doctor finally said, if you don't put him on a saline drip now, he will die. Then she finally went out, and then the doctor went out and was yelling at another doctor about the nurse. And fortunately, they did put me on the saline drip, and I did in fact live. So,
wow.
But it was intense. It was very life-changing. In fact, a lot of this was brought on by stress from my work. And because of work, I hadn't been dating anyone, I hadn't done anything. Well, I decided that needed to change. Like, I clearly needed to pay attention to some of the areas of my life I had not been paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Started doing a significant amount of dating in a short order. In fact, when I met my current partner, I was dating 4 people, but who were all aware of each other. But yeah, so anyway, that's that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tim. My goodness, what an experience! Just who go through that understand what you're saying right now, because it's, what I mean, it's not just up to you. That you are depending other people's. Your life is literally depending on other people, and you could see that you're not well, and things were not going in the right direction. And of course, you had this situation, this memory in your life where literally you thought you're not here anymore when you thought about the lights and everything. Wow, what a story! Thanks so much for sharing. Thank you very much.
Sorry it took so long, but there's a lot to it. So.
Tim, are you ready to go on a beautiful journey through your memories in life and to share your point of views?
Yep.
Amazing. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. So I've got here my best friend. Run the fun questions, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to play a song now just for us to relax a bit before the first question, okay?
Okay.
Let's do it. Right, so before we start the game, during the journey, if it comes up a question that you don't want to talk about some reason, you don't want to answer, always can change, okay?
Okay.
First question for you is, good question. What does love mean to you?
Start with the easy ones, huh? Well, it means a lot of things. It means caring about and for something or someone. It means acceptance. It means honesty, and trust. Um, Actually, that is one of the main reasons I am with the partner that I am. We literally talk about everything, and we are both open books to each other.
Wow. Do you believe that there are different kinds of love?
Mm-hmm. I tend to be of the mindset that I have very few people who I call friends, because to be a friend actually implies a certain amount of love, and a certain amount of investment in a person. I think in modern culture, friend gets tossed around a lot in parlance as anyone who you know. It's like, no, 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 those are acquaintances. Some of which you may not have met because, there is a difference between meeting someone in person and actually experiencing that whole person. And simply knowing someone online, there's a curtain that's sort of invisible that exists that changes dynamics. But I mean, I love Indian food, which is certainly a different type of love than I love my partner or my mom. But yeah, so yes, there are different kinds of love.
Amazing. Next question. Let's do it. Hey, team. Next question for you is, what's the best advice have you ever given?
Never apologize for being yourself.
Good one. Very good. And when you say that, what's the biggest joy of being team? What do you like the most about being you?
That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it that way. I think it's my perceptiveness and my ability to listen, which feed into each other. The more you listen, the more you know, because you're understanding what's going on in the space. When all the noise is happening, you're able to parse out what's actually being communicated if you're not one of the people making the noise.
Amazing. Absolutely. I think listening, you can learn a lot. For sure. Next question. Let's do it. Before the next question, team, tell me what's the biggest joy of being a herbalist? What do you like the most about your career? And the flip side, what do you find most challenging?
Well, I think that the biggest joy is actually seeing people who've had issues that traditional or allopathic medicine hasn't necessarily helped them with achieve results. Like, as an aromatherapist, if someone comes in and they're like, I have horrible anxiety, one of the first things I do is have them smell different oils. And I'll say, now tell me what you think. And they think what I'm asking is, do you like how this smells? But what I'm really looking for is a light bulb going off behind your eyes that says, yes, this is the oil that is actually doing something in my brain. Because those are the things that work. And so I love those aha moments. And I love teaching people how to better care for themselves. The challenging stuff is the stories. I had a person who came in and said that Their son had committed suicide. Within a year, their husband had left them. Their other son uh, disinherited himself, um, and so was estranged. And then the husband died shortly thereafter. That the ex-husband died, and she was like, "I need someone to help, something to help me sleep." Like, okay, first, I have to tell you, you probably need some therapy, but because that's just so much grief and trauma all at once, you can't possibly bear it alone. um, but then I mean, I did offer some verbal advice, but I mean, they can't fix everything. And
Yes.
knowing that limitation is important.
All right. Next question for you is, what did you like the most from your childhood and why?
Hmm. I like to sing. I was and act actually both. Uh, I when I was very little, like before my dad died when I was 8, and before that, when we would get together at his parents' house, I would organize my cousins and I to do plays that we would just make up improv, and then I was in musicals at church. I became the song leader at church. I directed musicals at church. I
Wow.
was in uh, plays in high school. My high school was too small to do musicals because there were 176 students in the high school and 130 some were in the band. So if you actually had orchestration, then that meant you had no one left to be in the cast because the overlap was too great. But I did do musicals in church camp, and actually the auditions for those were intense because some of the people were working in the St. Louis market already as professional actors. Um, but I later was in the Gay Men's Chorus of Chicago, and I've been in. There's a theater company called Terra Mysterium that I was in a play for, but I haven't had much adult exposure to such. I do go to theater, and I love theater, both musical and otherwise. But that's I do miss being more actively engaged in such.
Wow, amazing. And for you growing up as a gay boy, back in your hometown, a small hometown, it was challenge for you, or how when you look back, how was the experience for you?
I was very much in the closet. Um, in fact, so much so that when I went to college, I was having sex with men, telling myself I was still saving myself for marriage because I hadn't had sex with a woman, so I was still a virgin.
Wow.
For 2 full years until I realized, no, that's not what that means. Then I had a lot of self-loathing because it was the 90s, and I was like, well, if I'm gay, I'm an abomination. I deserve to die. And the way that I deserve to die is to get AIDS. So then I was having lots of sex trying to do that. Fortunately, at that point in time, I did not achieve that goal. um, but after about 2 years, I'm like, okay, let's stop and look at this. According to how I was brought up, God is perfect and makes no mistakes. And God made everything. Therefore, God made me. I am gay. Therefore, God made me gay. If God is perfect and makes no mistakes, then God intentionally made me gay. So it's not me that's the problem.
I like that.
It's this dogma that's the problem. And so that led to a lot of other stuff.
Oh,
um, but I've since had a much more healthy engagement with all of that. It was still a long time before I came out to my mom. Uh, that was several years later. It's funny. I had made arrangements for us to see Drowsy Chaperone, of all things. I wanted to see it. It was in St. Louis. I had missed it when it was in Chicago. And so I'm like, we can go see the show afterward when we're all happy. I can say this. So I thought I wasn't going to be able to make it to the show. So I called my mom and I told her, and the first words out of her mouth were, I don't think it's true. I think you just haven't had enough experience. What have you done with the woman? I'm like, I am not discussing my sex life with you. um, you've never discussed yours with me. This is like mutually agreed. No. um, and I don't know. It took. She's like, I don't know why you're telling me this right now. I don't understand. Like, I know you don't. But yeah, so she felt blindsided. Mind you, she taught me to embroider. um, Knew that I was into theater, all that stuff. It was, yeah. Like, the pieces were there. She just hadn't
Absolutely.
put the quilt together yet.
Absolutely. Sometimes our parents, they know us better than ourselves, but sometimes they just, you know what I mean? They maybe they don't want to put the puzzle together. They just want the puzzle around. You know what I mean? They just want to the
Yes.
puzzle all the time. They never put it in together. That's how they see sometimes. They don't want to get
Indeed.
all the puzzles together. You know what I mean?
Yes. She has since she came to one Gay Men's Chorus show where I was actually playing a nun. Um, um, and the one question she had was, "Where did you find shoes your size?" Because
Oh
I
my,
wear men's
oh,
13s, so I have big feet, especially when trying to find women's shoes. I mean, because you're looking at a 14 and a half or a 15 if for me to have shoes that actually fit. And I
oh,
don't have to do the wicked stepsister thing and cut off parts of my feet. But
oh, sweet. Next question. Ready?
yeah.
Let's do it. Next question. Next question for you is, tell us about your first vacation and why you consider that.
The year my dad died, my aunt and uncle also moved to Florida, to the Orlando area. And so we went on a road trip, my brothers and I, with my mom, my aunt Sherry, who her and her two kids, who were my youngest brother's age and younger, uh, and my great grandma and great grandma, all in a pickup truck with a camper top.
Oh my God,
um,
exciting.
they had my grandma and great grandma sat in lawn chairs all the way at the tailgate. We had this board built that was up at the front where the windows were that connected the two, and a little vent thing to pump some air conditioning through from the cab because Florida gets very hot in the summer, which is when we went. But we went to Disney and we went to Cape Canaveral to the Space Center and that kind of stuff, and it
I
was a good
did.
trip.
I did as well.
If one's going to go to Disney, being a child is the time to go.
I used to work for Disney Cruise Line actually a few years ago. Yeah, 2016. I used to work for Disney Cruise Line. We were based in Port Canaveral. So when you say about, I'm originally from Brazil, and where I come from, back in Brazil, is exactly the same weather as Florida. Yeah. So when I was there, because of course I was already living in London, and I went all the way to Florida, and I was like, oh my God, it got me back to my childhood memories, because the heat. I was like, wow, that's how I grew up. That's how it was my reality back in Brazil.
Gotcha. I am very heat averse. Like my dream vacation is to go to the ice hotel and to Antarctica.
So totally different.
Obviously separate trips because they're opposite ends of the earth, but
Right, I have 3 questions left. Okay, let's do it.
okay.
Right, before the next question, Tim, in the beginning of the interview, you mentioned about, you had a dream to live in Europe, yeah? Um, anywhere in specific, or a country or a place during that time? What was your, your dream at the time?
Truthfully, it didn't matter because I knew that Europe as a whole is about the size of the US. And so if you're anywhere in it, you can travel to any of the other places.
Yeah.
And I still like traveling, although I haven't done nearly enough of it. And I've only made one trip to Europe. And it was not to one of the places that was ever on on my radar at all. But when I left my last corporate job, I told people I was going to take a trip to Europe, and they said, "Oh, you should go to Prague." No, you should go to Prague. To a person, everyone who I said that to said, "You should go to Prague." And I'm like,
Amazing.
"Well, what's in Prague?" So I looked it up. Alphonse Mucha is my favorite artist, and his museum is in Prague, and he's interred in Prague because he's from the Czech Republic.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, you can actually go to a masked royal ball if you go there in February. It's expensive, but I could have done it. I didn't make it there in February, unfortunately. I was there for Easter, actually. Although it still snowed at Easter time there. Not every day, some days, but people were out on the streets regardless of the weather. And I had an amazing experience there. Uh, I actually became much more accepting of my own body there because people who I would have thought out of my league found me interesting. So it was a really good trip. I was there for 2 weeks and only went on two out trips, one to Kutna Hora, where the Bone Church is, and one to Český Krumlov, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserved medieval village.
Wow.
But yeah, it was awesome. I never ever in a million years thought I would get cultural overload. It did happen. It took 11 days.
Wow.
And then I was like, I don't want to see another cathedral. I don't want to see another, I don't want to go to the opera. I don't want to see a puppet show. I had seen one of those there. I don't want a museum. I just want to experience the people. Um, so I started going out, and that was fun too.
Wow. Funny, I had a few guests here on the show from Czech Republic. I get few
It's a
guests
beautiful
here.
place.
It's beautiful. My God, it's I had one of my, I think it was the last one I had. He loves Prague. He lives outside Prague, but he was going to Prague, and he was telling me the story. He was telling, "Oh, you should come to Prague during the springtime. It's the best time. Don't come in the winter. Don't come in the summer. The springtime is the best time to come to Prague." I was like, okay, let's make a note here on my trip diary.
I will vouch for that. Like I said, I was there for Easter, so
See? Okay, next question for you is, if you could be in somebody's place, in somebody's skin for 24 hours, who that would be and why? For any reason.
I don't know. I find that a difficult question to answer because I feel like every person is intended to be exactly who they are. And
Sure.
so it is not for me to experience them. Does
Absolutely.
that make sense?
Absolutely. I love your answer. They are not right or wrong. It's just your genuine answer. I love that, actually. Interesting. Amazing. Two questions left. Let's do it.
Okay.
Before the next question, as you mentioned as well about Chicago. Yeah, you lived there for 13 years, you said. Yeah.
Yep.
So what was the biggest joy of living in Chicago, in your opinion?
Well, I loved the fact that it was a huge city and that I didn't know my neighbors and that you could get lost. But at the same time, no matter where I would go in the city, I would always run into somebody I knew. It was crazy. Because you would think in a city of that many people, you could go out on a day and not run into someone. And it didn't matter what neighborhood I was in or where I was in the city, I would inevitably run into someone.
Interesting.
Which I don't know if that speaks to my social circles, which I've always felt like we're a little on the small side, or if it speaks to just the nature of the city. But it feels like it had the people are more like small town people in their connections with each other than you would expect. Well, for a city of its size, I mean, it's not like I went to New York to a what's the word? Like not a conference kind of thing,
Right.
and you would meet. The hallway to the bathroom wasn't wide enough to meet someone, so you have to turn to pass. In New York, you don't turn because turning means that you're giving up power to someone else. So I was like, that doesn't happen in Chicago. Like you recognize and you make accommodation and you go.
I see.
Um, it's it's turning into a much more a me place because gentrification being what it is. But it was it was it was nice. It was interesting. It was nice. It was not so. I felt more at liberty to just be. The
All right. Next question for you is, what is the biggest prize you ever won?
biggest prize I ever won. I didn't actually get to take advantage of the award. I did there one of my vendors for supplements had a contest for best advertising display, and I did a window display with you had to use the things that they gave you to make it. They gave me two camp chairs and a tent. And so I set those up in my window, my front window in my store, along with like that astroturfy carpety stuff in the bottom, and did a little campsite display. And I won a trip to Salt Lake City. Unfortunately, when I won it, I was in the hospital for 3 weeks when I had my near death experience,
Oh my God.
um, which is awful because I've never been to Salt Lake City and I was looking forward to that because I used to like to ski. I haven't been in ages. I mentioned I like winter, so snow skiing sounds like fun.
No, just didn't meant to be for some reason.
Indeed.
Ready for the last question, team?
Yep.
Let's do it. Last one. But before the last question, people watch this interview right now. Would you like to start a career to become herbalist? What would be your best piece of advice?
Do your research. And I don't just mean that in terms of understanding herbal medicine. I mean, understand what it means to actually have a practice and what it means to be able to sell things legally. Because in the States, the FDA does come after you for things if you aren't doing them the way that they're required to be done. Um, Actually, one of my vendors told me that they had a customer who was fined $40,000 for when someone else held up a bottle of supplements across a crowded room and said, "Will this help with my diabetes?" And they said yes.
Wow.
That meant that they were prescribing unapproved drugs and practicing medicine without a license. And it's like, so know what you can and can't do, what the limitations are of herbs, because there are. And yeah, just do your research, do your homework.
Right. Last question for you is, if you could have a coffee, yeah, or a cup of tea with a fictional character, who that would be and why?
Mm. Well, it would have to be Captain Picard from Star Trek.
Tell me.
I actually, so there were, I was in a graduating class of 39 people, and we had four valedictorians, of which I was one. And my valedictorian speech was entirely based on Star Trek, because that was the year that The Next Generation had its final episode. And it ended with a live long and prosper. And I don't know, it's just his experiences would be so interesting to hear more deeply what his thoughts were on them.
See. All right. It's not the end yet. Let's play now the word association game. Okay, I'm going to give away some words. Just one word that comes to your mind. Quick thinking. Okay. Let's start with fear.
Shame.
Say again.
Shame.
Okay. Money.
Need.
Family.
Love.
Life.
Long.
One word for love.
Kin. Kin.
Oh. Sex.
Fun.
I like that. Fun. One word for religion.
Dogma.
Politics.
Arguments.
Friendship.
Friendship.
Yep.
Support.
Desire.
Longing.
Regret.
Absolute zero.
Okay. Success.
It's a horrible answer, and it's not what I actually think, but wealth.
Okay. Wish.
Dream.
Happiness.
Joy.
One word for Chicago.
Big.
One word for Illinois.
Horn.
Interesting. Corn.
It is the reason we have the humidity levels we do.
It's interesting. Of course, I had so many guests on the show. Most of my guests, they are from the US. And I think I said Iowa for one of my guests. I just said corn as well, because of the cornfields. I was like, interesting. Right, one word for USA.
Experiment.
Interesting. And the last one now, herbalist, one word.
Healer.
Amazing. Let's pretend I'm going to meet your partner for a coffee, and I'm going to ask your partner, define team in one positive word and one negative word only. What he would say?
The negative word would probably be opinionated. The positive word, I think, would be affectionate.
What's the negative? I didn't get it.
Affectionate or opinionated? Which one?
Oh, see, I see that. And if I would ask the same question to your lovely mom, would be the same answer?
I think rather than affectionate, it would be caring.
Okay.
But I definitely think she would agree on the opinionated front.
Amazing.
She thinks I argue for the sake of arguing, but I tend to. I like understanding how people work and why they think the way that they do. So sometimes I ask questions that challenge those things to see where and why, and people don't like that.
You like a good debate. You like debating. You like that.
Yes.
Amazing. Let's play now, Tim, in the magic box, and you can ask me a question. But before you ask me the question, as you mentioned that from tomorrow, your mom is starting her retirement journey, yeah? She's watching this interview right now, and you have a moment to send her a message. What would you say?
I love you, and you've earned this.
Oh, sweet. Very sweet. Okay, Tim, you can ask me a question now.
Why do you do this?
Wow. Very good question. You know what, Tim? 2020, when the world went upside down, yeah, I think
Yes.
you know why.
Indeed.
I think, during that time, a lot of us, we found ourselves in a challenge situation, because the not knowing was a bit scary. You didn't know, what's next, answer. We couldn't find answers for things that was happening at the time.
Yep.
Saying that, I strongly believe that, people, all of us here, we come to these words for a reason. We have something that you want to share. There's something about us that we came to this world for. And fun enough, through my life, I always admire people when they go like, you know what, I do what I love. I love, what's every morning when I wake up, I know that I'm gonna be doing something that I'm meant to be doing. And I always felt fascinated about that because, imagine how amazing it is to know. And saying that, actually, I strongly believe as well that all of us, we can do different, journeys, different areas, and still feel the happiest and, the most enjoyable. I believe that all of us, we can do different things. Um, Before the COVID, I was already thinking about doing something on YouTube where I could connect with people, I could express myself, but I didn't know what I could do. I was like, my God, what can I do? What can I do that, I didn't want to do something that people they are doing already. I wanted something to about me that I could express myself, that I could, connect with people. But I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know. Literally, I was thinking, I was excited about the idea, but I didn't know what I could do. So back to 2020, here in England, in London, we could leave the house once a day for exercise in the park, for run, or 1 hour per day. So and I was doing that every afternoon. So I was going for a run in the park, and one of those run, this idea came along, and I was like, wow. I remember the moments. I remember the place where I was because it was so powerful. I was like, my God, that's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna, go online. I'm gonna find some questions. I'm gonna do some research, and literally, I'm gonna invite people around the world, random people, and I'm gonna see their answer. I'm gonna ask what they think about it, what their point of views. At the same time, as well, I'd like them to express themselves. To share stories, to make memories, and that's what's about the Magic Box. It's about you are here expressing yourself, being yourself, and at the same time as well we are connect with people and helping people as well. You're sharing your near death experience that wasn't easy for you, but at the same time as well, you never know, people watch this interview, they might be in the same experience, but from different concepts, different things, and seeing someone talking so open about it, you were laughing, talking about it was so interesting. You're talking about those, moments in your life, and you're laughing, you're smiling, it's interesting that I think here in the show, I'm so grateful, Tim, to be able to connect with so many people around the globe and, let them express themselves. So yeah, that's the whole idea of the Magic Box, and that's how the show started.
Cool. I'm It kind of feeds into the same everyone's here to be who they are kind of idea, and wanting to understand what that is and why that is and why it should work together. Because I also firmly believe we live on a tiny rock floating in an infinite space. And so rather than quabble over specks of dust on that rock surface, we should be working together. um, and all being the humans that we were meant to be.
Absolutely. And I think we are all in the same boat. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who
Yep,
you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your status in life. What matters here, the day we are all navigating, in one direction. We are all in the same boat as well. That's how I see. And it's fascinating to see people expressing themselves, sharing stories, and it's the best for sure. Did you enjoy the interview?
yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks for being so kind. When I approached you online, you literally, had a search and okay, let's see what it's about. And here we are. We made memories right now. So yeah,
That's true.
thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Before you go, if you can share a positive message or anything that you live by.
Um, don't be afraid to be yourself and have faith in yourself that you can succeed.
Amazing. Very good. Regards to your partner, regards to your mom, send my regards to her on her new journey start tomorrow. Wish her all the best, and I hope that she enjoyed a lot this new journey in her life. Okay? Thanks so much for the interview. Okay?
Thank you.
Take care, team. Bye-bye.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye.
Bye. So, did you like the show? Don't forget to give a like, share it, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to be part of the show as well, first, subscribe to our channel, and after that, just go to our website, www.williamandthemagicbox.com, and send us a request saying why you'd like to be part of the show. And I see you there. Bye-bye. See you next time.